Welcome to Writing Black Joy Season 3. I'm Sophia Robinson, and I'm a story listener, a writing coach, an editor, as well as the producer of Writing Black Joy, a virtual space that celebrates, centers, and promotes the voices of Black writers and storytellers with joyful and uplifting stories. Here, you'll find conversations with some of my favorite Black writers and storytellers, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, hear more about their creative processes, and find inspiration for your own creative ventures, as well as tips and strategies for writing poetry, blogs, creative nonfiction, fiction, plays, and so much more from all types of writers, as well as a sneak peek into the writing life. You could even find your next favorite writer, book, poem, play, or blog. And if you're a Black writer who is looking for a coach or an editor to help you bring your joyful story into the world, then click on my website below to find out how to work with me. In the meantime, let's go to today's guest. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. Today, I have another dream guest with me, and her name is Mirna Valerio. I first saw Mirna speaking on stage a few years ago, and I just thought she was the coolest. Partially because I had discovered her before I saw her speaking on stage, and she was a runner. I fancied myself a bit of a runner at the time, and so I always thought she was so cool. And so to then see her on stage was like, oh my gosh, it's Mirna. So honestly, I think I might have even had a bit of a fangirl moment when she said yes to coming on my podcast. So yeah, today is Mirna's turn, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. So Mirna Valerio is a native of Brooklyn, New York, a former educator and a cross-country coach, ultramarathoner, cyclist, skier, DEI practitioner, and the author of the memoir, A Beautiful Work in Progress. She began running in high school and then recommitted to the sport after a health scare in 2008, and she started her blog, Fatgirlrunning, about her experiences as a larger woman in a world of thinner endurance athletes while training for her first marathon. Mirna's athletic story has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Runner's World, on NBC Nightly News, CNN, and in the viral documentary short, REI Presents The Mirnavator. Her writing has been featured in Women's Running, Self, Outside, and Runner's World. In 2018, she was chosen as a National Geographic Adventurer of the Year, and since then has appeared on The Kelly Clarkson Show, Access Daily, The Today Show, and Good Morning America. Her partners include LL Bean, Ford Bronco, Darn Tough Vermont, Lululemon Athletica, Salsa Cycles, Inside Tracker, Hydro Flask, and Garmin. She currently lives and trains in Vermont with her son Rashid and is wholeheartedly enamored and obsessed with downhill skiing, which I take my hat off to you, Mirna, because I don't do cold weather sports, as you can imagine, being from Barbados. Mirna and I talk about her journey from blogger to published author as she writes about her running life, writing fiction and nonfiction, her current project, which is about Black joy and the natural world, how she handles feedback and rejection, how she decided to write her first fiction novel during NaNoWriMo, wild writing, legacy, and so much more. We laugh a lot in this one, and my sound definitely goes in and out a little bit, which I'm a little bit disappointed about, but I didn't want to cut the episode altogether. So just go with it. It was a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me again this week for Writing Black Joy. And I have another one of my dream podcast guests on. She does not know this, but I have a list of people that I wanted on my podcast this season, and you were one of them, Mirna. So wow. I know, right? So glad you could join me. Fantastic to have you. And everybody knows, because I would have said it at the beginning, that you are the author of A Beautiful Work in Progress, among other things. But I want to take it back, because I feel like you started life as a blogger.
You know, I did. It was, I started well, actually, before starting blogging. I was in grad school for writing,
Mm.
which I think a lot of people didn't expect. They expected me to, pursue music a little bit more. I'm a musician. I'd sing opera.
Beautifully,
I'm classically trained.
beautifully, might I
Yeah.
add. Lovely.
And so I went to grad school actually first for music education, and I didn't like it. I felt like it was a waste of my personal time because I didn't really want all that really intense training to do a lot of stuff that I already need to do. And so I switched over to another program for creative nonfiction, and which I've always written. I was a writer in college, and in addition to being a musician and a Spanish major, I wrote for the school paper. And so I was really kind of living out this dream of doing creative nonfiction. And of course, life intervened. So my kid kept getting sick. My job was really stressful, and so I wasn't able to finish that program. So a couple of years later, I started this blog when I was training for my first marathon, Fatgirlrunning.
Mm.
And and it was cool because I didn't even really know what a blog was at that point. But it was an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity for me to write something without having it be edited by people who aren't really editors or writers. I mean, no shade to anybody that's ever edited my writing, but yeah, shade to this one person who's not. Anyway, so and I'm a long form writer. I like just writing forever and including all the details, which can be problematic.
Oh,
For a short attention
I'm a
span,
long form writer here. I
you
feel you.
know.
Definitely problematic.
you know and so yeah, and I started this blog, and it was just fun. When I wrote a post, which was not every day or every week even or every month even, I just had fun with the writing, and it was just an outlet for me to share stories of running and of my running life and all of the the ancillary things that were included in my running life. And that's how this part of my writing life got started, because after my blog was noticed, after my blog was noticed by Wall Street Journal, Runner's World, obviously these are major international publications.
Mm.
um, I gathered, like, I gained this audience that I had never had before. Uh, and as a result of that, I got approached by a couple of agents asking me if I wanted to write a book, sort of based on my blog, or if I would write a how to run book or something else. And I said, well, I don't want to write a how to run book.
Mm.
Um, that's not what I do. I don't write instructional things. I write nonfiction, like narrative nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I put together, and I finally contracted with Jane Distel, who was Barack Obama's first agent. I'm just saying, dropping a name, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Love it.
And we put a proposal together, and I got to write this book, like kind of the book of my dreams. It's a memoir. I get to do this narrative nonfiction thing. I get to kind of dig into my family and talk about something that's really exciting and really part of my identity, which is running. Did I ever think I would write a memoir about running? No. But I did, and it keeps, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I get a couple of messages every week about, oh, how this book has changed my life. And, if I wrote it today, I would probably write it a little differently, having the more wisdom and being a little bit older. But it's still cool that I got to write a book. It was published, and I still get royalty checks. I mean, it's pretty cool, right?
That is very cool. So I discovered you when you had your blog, Fatgirlrunning.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about how you just did it to have sort of an outlet to talk about something that was really important to you. And then it, as you said, it got noticed. How did you feel about that? Because I think, I don't know, sometimes it feels good to get your work noticed, but
Mm-hmm.
do you ever feel like
Is there a level of discomfort having a more public audience, I guess,
Yes.
outside of my friends and family.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is it, right? So when I started my blog, honestly, like, because everybody's like, put us out there on the internet. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, like, really, who's reading it? Like Nicola, hey Nicola's reading it, listeners, that type of thing. Like, even though I knew it was out on the internet, like, I genuinely did not expect like
Right. Right.
people who weren't in my circle to read it. And I think that is the type of thing, even people who want to write, right? I think that's all this equally is equal parts of like exciting and scary, isn't it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I want to write, I want to share my story with the world, but also like the world. Hang on, no, maybe not the world,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
And,
difficult.
and that's the interesting thing about the internet. Back a couple of years ago, or when I started my blog in 2011, oh my goodness, that's 12 years ago.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
that's
So I
not.
started my blog. I actually named it in 2009 and then didn't write anything in it for about a year and a half. And yeah, I was kind of writing it, to write, number one, and to share with my friends and my family. And I know that my mom read my blog, and I knew that some of my friends did because I would share it on Facebook. Some people would subscribe to it on an RSS feed, and it was cool to get commentary. Oh, I love the story, or I'm so mad that happened to you. And that was all I wanted. That I didn't even want that. Like I just wanted an outlet to write. And so, if one or two people saw what I wrote and enjoyed my stories, that I was Gucci. And then I wrote this one piece in in 2014. And this was a pivotal year for me, um, because I was coaching, I was training for ultra marathons. I started to have groin pain and back pain, and the groin pain was actually part of my back pain, which I didn't know yet.
Mm.
And I was super busy, and I had a bad run, and I very rarely have bad runs. And I had a bad run. A lot of stuff was on my shoulders, and I was thinking through a lot of things that people had said to me on this particular run. It was 5 miles, and I remember it was a spring day like it is today, here in Vermont, and I was on spring break. So I went outside. My back was hurting. I'm thinking about all this negative stuff, and one of the things was, one of my colleagues had said, two of my colleagues actually had said to me, sort of in passing and in different situations, that the way that I dressed wasn't great. And yeah, and
What?
I've had multiple people in my life say these things to me. Uh, Two of them ended up apologizing when I wrote this in my blog, and they didn't realize that they had said something so hurtful. Um, and because I dressed really casual because I didn't care. And as a teacher, even at a fairly traditional school, like I dressed pretty casual because that didn't, that wasn't,
Just wasn't
it didn't
important.
signify, my level of professionalism, and my ability to be a teacher. And so anyway, so there was that. And then I had gone to the doctor that day in the morning, and on my intake, it was a new doctor. On my intake form, I said, because I was in a bad mood the entire day, I said, I run 5 to 6 times a week. I'm on this long-term health and wellness journey. Don't just look at me and assume that I don't do any kinds of movement because I am a plus size woman. Actually ask me questions and and get some information. Like, so I wrote about all of this in this blog post. And that blog post got eyes on it, a
Mm.
lot of eyes.
Mm.
And in a very short time, I don't even know what the metrics are because I didn't follow metrics. I didn't care. And uh, and come to find out, a couple of months later, somebody at NBC had read this
Oh.
and had invited me to do an interview with her, pre the New York City Marathon.
Mm.
And but I'd seen it too late because, again, I didn't really check comments. I didn't check that stuff. And so it was too late for that. But I was like, wow, somebody at NBC was reading my blog. And maybe it was because of the key words that I used. I didn't even know about that. I didn't know about SEO. And I was like, well, that's cool. I was like, well, if you ever have anything else that you want to interview me about, as far as marathons and running go, cool, interview me. So that was the start, I think, of
Mm.
me knowing that I had more eyes on my blog than just my mom or my close family and friends. And then in February, I get an email from Rachel Bachman at Wall Street Journal. Now, I was in a meeting that I did not want to be in,
Mm.
and they had very specifically asked us not to have our phones on because, you know, but I always had my phone on because my son was sick all the time. And every time I went somewhere or I did a conference, that kid got sick. And so it still happens today, and he'll be 20 next month.
I was
So
about to say, is he an
like
adult
always get
now?
sick,
Like,
man. But you gotta take care of yourself now.
yeah.
But and so I'm looking at this email because I'm thinking, oh, my phone is buzzing. Oh, my kid must be sick. I look at the email. It's a message from Rachel Bachman at Wall Street Journal. I was like, well, that's funny because I don't subscribe to them. But I'm reading the email. I'm like, oh, what? She's reading my blog. What? Like, everybody read my blog now? And that began this trajectory that has not stopped yet. It
I
hasn't
saw an
stopped.
article about you 2 days ago, so it clearly still hasn't
There's
stopped.
another one. There's another one that came out yesterday as well.
Oh
So
my
that I
goodness.
haven't posted about yet. But it's really cool to like ride this wave of notoriety when when it comes to running, being a plus size runner, being a black plus size runner, being a black female plus size runner who does ultra marathons, and who was sponsored by all these big companies. And so it's really cool. So that was the birth of the my writing life now. And I'll tell you about my next book in a minute.
That's that's amazing. And I want to know because I follow you on Facebook. Are you still writing that novel?
Yeah, I just had a writing session this morning with
You're gonna
my writing group.
nice.
I submitted 100 and something pages to my agent
Mm.
with with this in the subject line. Am I wasting my time?
No, you're not. But I like the
I
comment.
have yeah, I have about just under 300 pages.
Okay.
Now, some of it is still single spaced and unedited. So it'll be over 300
300
pages.
pages.
But it needs a lot of editing. And so when I got the email back from her with feedback, I was like, two things can happen. I can, my ego will be crushed, but she'll let me off the hook, so I don't have to write this. I don't have to keep working on it. Or she'll be like, here's some feedback. Stop being stupid. Keep writing. And so it was number two. That's what happened.
Of
She's
course,
like, here's some feedback. You're a gifted writer. Duh. Stop being stupid. We're gonna set you up with a developmental editor. Cause she said the writing's great.
yeah.
I need help with my plot line. So and I don't consider myself a fiction writer. I mean, even though I'm writing fiction.
Mm.
Um so yeah, so that's where I am. I feel light now that I've gotten most of it done for now anyway. And that I can, when I start working with a developmental editor, like my writing will be that much better. So
Oh, absolutely, it will.
yeah.
I'd love to talk a bit about that shortly. But I'd also love to know. So you're aware, podcast is called Writing Black Joy. What made you say yes instead of burying my my message at the bottom of your DM?
First of all, I get interviewed by a lot of people. Most of them are white men.
Oh,
And yeah. And
those things.
and that's all fine and good, but I'd rather, just like when I pick out what I'm going to read for the year, I try to really center people in marginalized communities. And and make sure that I am supporting their work. I like, supporting Black businesses and, and so, because I hope that people do that for me as well. And yeah, and Black Joy, my novel that I'm working on now, is about Black joy. I mean, in so many words, it is about Black joy in the natural world, or how it brings us Black joy. And so, or how it brings us joy, in general. And so yeah. So I was like, yeah, this is one I want to do, because I say no a lot because I have to. I'm, as you can see, I'm everywhere.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you said yes. I'm really glad because
So thank you for having me though.
That's absolutely great. So tell me, I ask all my guests to bring a quote. I don't know if you got that message. And if you don't, just let me know.
I love the Mary Oliver quote, what will you do with this one with this one and precious life? Okay, it is. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life.
Yes.
And I think that line is so emblematic of the way that I try to live my life. Life is short. As we continue to learn, you never know when you're going to go. And you might as well live it to the fullest. Now, does that mean doing crazy things every day? No, not necessarily.
Some people might say running an ultra.
Some people like, I don't need to do crazy stuff every day. Like, I am very happy sitting at home, like just kind of putzing around and not doing anything, in between my crazy trips, so, but really just seeking out the adventure, whether it is a sort of physical adventure, whether you're going somewhere, whether you're having an adventure in your head, whether you're doing something different, something that's vastly different from what you normally do. And not everybody is wired that way, but I definitely am wired that way. And so that's, I want to make sure that I am living my own personal life to its fullest. I don't want to be an angel, because I will be an angel. Who is saying, oh, I should have done that. I could have done that. I would have done that if, I don't want that. I don't want to, be on my deathbed thinking those things. Of course there will be things that I will regret not having tried, but for the most part, I think I would want to be a person who just has a very short list of those things.
Yeah. That sounds really good to me. I feel exactly the same. So I am curious. How do you deal with? Because you talked a bit earlier about sending the draft out to your agent, and they're talking about developmental editor and going through that sort of process. But I know that you talked earlier as well about when you had that, that moment in 2014 when you wrote the post about the things that people say to you. I also think sometimes when you're creative, like there's always that rejection, right? There's always that, like, you ask someone to be on your podcast and they say no, or they don't respond, or, well, that's me. Or, you pitch an article and it's a no, or whatever the case may be. You put your book out there and people are like, I'll pass. How do you deal with that? And I guess you must get that on the trail as well, right? You must get comments from people on the trail as well.
Like, oh, wow. Like, some people will be like, okay, what do we have going on here? It's always white people that say that stuff. And
why people feel so open to tell people anyhow.
Like, whoa, like I've never seen this before. Or I didn't know Black people could speak Spanish. This is, when I was a teacher. Wow. I'm like, do you know anything about the world? Apparently not. And he's like, these are like very wealthy, very wealthy people that are saying things like that. The ones who are supposed to be cultured and worldly and sophisticated are saying things like this to me. But as far as writing is concerned, because I can talk about for hours on the perception of who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm on the trail. Mm-hmm. But it is, as in any art, any creation of art, and then finally sort of pushing that art out into the world, it is anxiety inducing. Do you know how many times I avoid looking at any email my agent sends me? My literary agent. Like, it could be a really good one, but I'm like, I have to have some coffee and a drink to be able to read this email, because it's usually in all caps. Yeah, so like I'm an avoider. Like, I avoid things until I can't avoid them anymore. But it's nerve-wracking, and it's something that comes from you. And so of course you're going to be, maybe not everybody, maybe people who are narcissists. It's scary to put it out into the world. It's scary to hand it over to your agent. It's scary to give it to a friend and say, hey, can you be really honest about this and give me some feedback? I can take it. Like, I mean, I can take it, but I don't want to take it, but I can take it. Yeah. And so yeah, it is definitely scary, and always know, and I have to tell this to myself all the time, that, anytime you are working on a first draft, it's going to be drivel. Like Jennifer Weiner says it, any of those big, huge writers who keep churning out books every year, like, they all say, every single one of them will say a version of, oh, that first draft is always going to be crap. Right? And so, like, I'm on my writing group this morning, I'm looking at this chapter that I haven't touched since November 2020. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is, I even called this novel that I started during NaNoWriMo 2020, National Novel Writing Month. I call it trash novel. Well, I actually renamed it. It was trash novel because I knew it was going to be trash. I knew that first draft was absolutely going to be trash. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, there's some cool nuggets in here. I can see that now. But the writing, I got to work on that. And I don't feel bad about it anymore. Like, I'm like, I know what to expect. I know it's going to be a jumble of words. Yeah. That I have to sift through to make some meaning of. And here's this nugget. Let me work from this nugget and make this writing a little bit better. So yeah, and it's hard. And like editors and your agent, if you have one, and other people, if you ask their help, they're going to give it to you. And hopefully they will be honest. And that honesty will help you be a better writer, to connect with people more easily. So, but it's hard. It's so hard because it's so personal, and it is personal. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, you can't take it personally. I'm a human being. How am I? And that creation sprung forth from my own brain and my own body, like, how am I not supposed to take it personally? So it's the both and, you have that sort of human element, your own human emotional element, and then there's all right, here's what we got, the practical element. Here's where we can change this to make this a more effective narrative. Here's where your description is really off and I don't even know what you're talking about. Here's, here's what, did you just make up a word? Yes.
All words are made up, but this one is very made up. Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that. That's so good. So I know you said you started this novel in NaNoWriMo in 2020. I have a special place in my heart for that. That's what I wrote my first novel during NaNoWriMo. It's the one that I published by emailing it out to all my friends. It was awesome. It's the best time ever. Yeah, totally. I didn't even pretend. I was like, I wrote this novel. Who wants to read it? Like, I'm gonna email it to you. I did it one chapter at a time. I was remembering being like a teen, like in my late teens. Stephen King had written this book. I think it was The Green Mile, actually. And I was in the UK at the time. And every week you could go to the newsagent and buy like 1/6 of it.
Oh,
So fun. And I was like, I'm going to do that, but via email and only with my friends. And so I did that with my
that
NaNoWriMo.
is so cool.
It was the most fun I've ever had in my life. I loved it. I'm pretty, sure that if I look back at it now, it probably wasn't amazing, but it was fun. It was super fun. Um, so yeah, I have a
Mhm.
special place in my heart for NaNoWriMo. But you said NaNoWriMo 2020. What do you think that space gave you? That space between
I
now?
I will tell you exactly what that whole thing was about. So I actually started writing another book
Mhm.
um, about sort of parenting through adventure. Because I had taken, maybe it wasn't that specifically, but like I had taken my son out on, I took him out of school. So after his 10th grade, I took him out of school so we could travel for a year together. And my whole year had been planned out. This is September of 2019. And so we went to all these like exotic places, Costa Rica. We went to Mexico. He learned how to surf. Well, I had already knew how to surf, so I took him down to where I learned how to surf in Costa Rica. So we did that. We went to Mexico. We went to California. Spent a bunch of time in the Utah desert. We went to Bermuda. We went to all these like really cool places. And I saw in him all of this growth. He had had a really tough 10th grade year, and I saw this maturing, this growth, this sort of and let him sleep. And it was an amazing thing. And then, of course, we're in LA, March 2020, COVID the beginning of what we know as COVID happened. And so we're on lockdown. And so we're home. And so I decided to start writing this book on adventure. We had enough adventures and enough growth and enough experiences for me to pen an entire book or two. And so I started writing this book, and the title essay, which probably won't be the title essay when I actually finish writing it, was about him, my son, going missing in the Copper Canyons in Mexico.
Ooh.
So he went missing. Yeah. And there were a lot of lessons learned from that particular trip. We were trail running, and if you know anything about the Copper Canyons, there's a lot of drug trafficking there, but at night. But in the daytime, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's wonderful. It's like a really sort of prime destination for hiking and trail running and getting to know the indigenous communities of the area. And so we were on this trip. He goes missing. Obviously, he's fine because everybody would have known. He's fine. And I haven't really even written about this incident on Facebook because it's hard to write about. So I was writing this essay about that and all the lessons learned and this big huge metaphor from that came from being on a trail and knowing the right path and teenagers like actually they know what the right path is. They know when they're off track, and making a decision whether or not to get back on the right path. So but I couldn't write it. I was too close to that. I needed some space. And, there's all the anxiety from COVID happening. There's all the anxiety from like losing a bunch of work suddenly. That's everybody, right? And then having to stay home and not having this outlet of, being outdoors and stuff because we were inside. And so November rolls around and I'm like, I need to be writing something. I had, excuse me. I'd had a call with my agent and I said, I just can't write work on anything right now. But then I heard Jasmine Guillory
Mm.
on a podcast, and I think maybe it was Trevor Noah or somebody. And I heard her talk about how it was the way that she wrote her first novel. She was a lawyer and out in LA and she decided to do NaNoWriMo. And that's how she wrote her first novel. I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll do that because I had read all of her books at that point, just back to back to back to back, because I needed something not serious, not super, super serious to be reading. And so, because I tend to read really heavy nonfiction. And so So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. November, and I did all the research. November rolled around and I cleared my schedule. At this point, I had a lot of work coming in, actually, a lot of virtual speaking, a lot of workshopping. I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to have fun. I'm just going to write fiction, even though I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I had been toying around with this idea of who the main character might be and what sort of situation she might be in. And so I just started writing and it just kind of poured out of me. I had no expectations. You're supposed to do 50,000 words or more, right? And I was like, okay, I can do 50,000 words if I have nothing else to do. So I wrote every day, almost every day, because there's that little tracker with all the badges that you get.
I'm all about the badges.
Like 7-day streak, yeah. Even though I only wrote 200 words today, whatever. 7-day streak. And and it was just so fun. And I'm like, where are all these scenarios coming from? Where are all these characters coming from in these places? Like it must have been stuck in my subconscious. And it was so fun. And I think I might have participated in some of the sprints on Twitter. They like, 30-minute sprint or 15-minute sprint. And I'd be like, oh, this is so fun. This is so awesome on Twitter, right? So after November, I get my 50,000 words. After that's over, I put it away. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like real cool. I loved that process. Wow. I get an email from my agent and she's like, you've been working on anything? I'm like, no.
Twitter knows you've been working on something. You liar.
I was like, and I was adamant about that. I was like, no, I'm not working on anything. And then she finds out that I was working, doing the NaNoWriMo thing. And I'm like, well, you can't see it. I'm like, you can't see it. It's trash. I even named it Trash Novel. And like, I gotta see it. Like, what is it about? And I'm like, it's about this Black middle-aged woman who goes on a solo backpacking trip to, for her own health, also to heal some trauma from high school. And where she lost her best friend and her favorite teacher on this in the woods. And then her son saves her. I flipped the whole scenario up from the nonfiction I had been writing, right? The son saves her and like finds her. And there's all this other stuff, all this intrigue. And she's like, I love it. I need a novel concept in a couple of chapters. I'm like, I don't even know what a novel concept is. Like, what? So I looked it up on Google. So I sent her a couple of chapters. She's like, great, keep writing. And I'm like, oh God, no. Now I have to finish this. And it's been like in fits and spurts because I travel so much. I write the best on the plane or when I'm at home. I can't really, it's very hard for me to write anywhere else because I'm super hyper focused on the plane. I got my earbuds in, my AirPods in and my sweatshirt with my hoodie on, and then I'm like, like that meme with the cat.
Yeah, the one with the Kermit going,
yeah,
with a finger.
And so there's that, and then when I'm at home, I can also be sort of very, very focused, but I'm not home a whole lot. And then if I'm away, it's usually because I'm doing something very physical where that just takes away all my energy for the rest of the day. So anyway, so I'm finally at a place almost 3 years later where I can probably, I don't believe I'm actually saying this, hand in a manuscript by the end of the year.
So if you decide, right, that you want me to cut that out.
No, you know what? Put it there because it's, sometimes things don't work out, right? Yeah. I said probably. I didn't say I'm gonna definitely hand it in by December 30th. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying probably I will be able to.
Yes, I hear you.
You know what? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? Yeah. It is not my only source of income, so I have a little bit of flexibility with that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and if it doesn't sell, that is okay. Will
Yeah.
my ego hurt? Yes. Will
Absolutely.
I die from it? No. I mean, maybe I'll die from something else. But like, yeah. So, but it has been such a learning journey.
Mm.
I'm learning about myself. I'm learning more and more, and most writers are very, very prolific readers. So yeah, I'm a reader. Like I will be thinking about a book all day, a book that's reserved for my nighttime reading in bed. And I'm like, I just can't wait to go to bed because I can't wait to read this book, I listen to books all day while I'm driving, while I'm traveling, and then I'm reading other books, right? So if somebody reads it, if if I have to go if I feel compelled to go a different route, and like self-publish, I don't know, whatever, then I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But like, I just want to get it done.
Okay.
I want it to be the best that it can be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my writing has changed in this process, with my writing group that I write with, in the feedback that I've gotten. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Oh, you know what? Thank you. Damn
Mm.
it, why didn't I think about that? Like,
Yeah.
I'm such an idiot. Oh my God, I'm
Awful
such
and
a bad
beautiful
writer.
all at the same time.
you
Isn't
know,
it?
so yeah, like it's definitely been a really helpful exercise, and also an exercise in patience with myself and my own frustrations.
Mm. Well, if you decide to email a chapter out a day to your friends, just drop me on your email list. I'll read it. That
Will
could be
do,
your
will do.
last option, okay? I know it was my first option, but unlike you, I haven't figured out how to conquer that fear of rejection, and so
Mm.
I just sent it to the people that I knew would
No, you
reject.
don't conquer. I mean, I don't think you can conquer the fear of rejection because we're humans, right? You just
Mm,
know that it's probably going to come and it's going to suck and it feels really bad. And that's okay. And I think it's okay. Like I'm not into like the whole toxic positivity thing. A failure is just the first attempt in learning. Fine, fine. It is. That's true, but also acknowledge that it hurts.
yeah.
And that it hurts your heart that somebody didn't like what you gave them,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wrote a terrible novel after I wrote that novel that I really had fun. The following NaNoWriMo, I wrote a novel that was so awful that I've literally never looked at it again. And a friend of mine said to me last year, she was like, I don't think it's really that bad. So are you sure? I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it is. She said, I'll send it to me. I'll send you some feedback. She's never emailed me again. So I think,
Woo, see,
like,
sometimes you just gotta believe people. All right, believe Black
believe me,
women.
it's terrible. But I like what you say about the space, because I think sometimes too that the space doesn't make it any better, but it might
Mm,
give you some more ideas that you might not have had, the first time around, and that type of thing. So that's
yeah,
good.
yeah.
And I had another one that I started that I so wanted to write, and I think I put too much pressure on myself, and so then it's
Yeah.
still written on my computer. I said to someone the other, I was like, I've written 50,000 words and I've said nothing. And she's like, I don't understand what you mean. And I was like, just trust me.
Okay, trust me on that. Trust me on
Yeah, so
that. Okay, I know what I'm talking about.
I'm glad to hear that you're still working on yours 3 years later, because it gives me hope that I can still pick mine up and do something with it. So
Yes, yes.
absolutely. What advice might you give a budding creative writer, whether it's fiction, whether it's nonfiction? You've learned a lot of lessons from both fiction and nonfiction.
I find it very helpful to let me backtrack. I don't find it helpful when people say, well, you must write every day and you must have a schedule and you must get up at 5 a.m. I don't know why I'm talking like this, but because that does not work for a lot of different lifestyles, right? And if it works for you, it works for you. That is awesome. Continue doing what works for you. But you have to find what works for you. Is
Mm.
it writing in a journal? Is it speaking into your voice memo on your phone and then writing it down later? Is it getting inspired by a line of poetry or something like we do in Wild Writing? I do this writing retreat and it's called Wild Writing, and they utilize lines of poetry or prose to get you started, and it's so cool. And you write this like thing where you're being quite repetitive with the line, but by the end you're saying what you really need to say, whatever it is, right?
I love that.
And yeah, and it's called Wild Writing. It's so cool. Take a class. That can be really scary. Um, Even as somebody who has published a whole book and various articles in magazines, like I still take classes and I go to writing retreats where I'm learning from other writers. Um, and that's really important for me. I'm a lifelong learner, and hopefully you're in a situation where there's sharing and where there's really gentle um, feedback on your writing to make you a better writer. And I've also been in rooms where everyone's posturing and talking about literary theory. And I'm like, I can do that too, but that's not what I came here for, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so I think, you know, continue learning, read, 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 read. Whether that reading is you picking up a paper book, a physical book, or you're doing an audio book, or you have a Kindle or some other kind of reader. Read, read, read. It's just like it's kind of like AI. It just puts words into your head. It puts scenarios into your head and descriptions. I'm serious. You see, like, well, I'm like, I can't, how do I describe this for people who are listening? I'm like dumping stuff into my brain, right? That's what it does. And it just gives you like it makes your vocabulary better and more expansive. And it just gives you ideas about how to formulate your own writing. You know, even if you're copying someone's style or the way that they do prose or the way that they do poetry, like eventually your stuff comes in, right? So yeah, read, take a class, learn, and then, you know, write when it's right for you, right? And know that sometimes it's not going to feel right for you. Right. Did I want to get up and write this morning? Hell no. I wanted to go out and run and enjoy the sunshine because we don't really have sun in Vermont. So but I had a date. I had a date at 10:30 a.m. with this person who had woken themselves up early on the West Coast, right, to write with me. And so like maybe it's being in a writing group, maybe it's just writing, you know, reading a book and getting inspired by it and just writing what inspired you in the margins of your book.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know, there's so many different ways. Maybe you need a prompt. You know, there's so many websites that will offer prompts. Some of the prompts are real dumb, but you know, from some of the dumbest prompts, I've written the best stuff.
Good point. That's a good point. One of my favorite writing exercises was this lady called Sarah Selecki, who I also met at WDS years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She every so often she does it. It's a free challenge that she does, and she sends out images. Like one is of a person, one is of a place, and one is of a thing, I guess. And it's just these three images, and you just write. And I super enjoy that. So good.
Because you could create a whole scenario, like especially if you're writing fiction, like that could be the start of something really great.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
And it's so interesting to see how many different scenarios people come up with one photo or one image, right? So yeah, there are tons and tons of different ways to get started writing, to continue your writing, or to get back into it.
Yeah, I love that. You said two things that reminded me of two things. I'm sorry, that made no sense. One of them was when you talked about writing at a time that's convenient for you. I remember years ago reading an article, and if I can find it again, I'll link it in the show notes. And if you don't see it in the show notes, it means I haven't found it again. But it was this woman who is a mother, and she wrote about how mothers write. And she was like in the bathroom up against the back of the wall. And it was so, you know, I got what she was saying, because the image, you know, all along, and sometimes I work with writers, and sometimes you have this image in your mind of like sitting out in this cottage all alone with your typewriter. Yeah, I'm old. Okay, I'm a typewriter. Okay, I'm old. I'm sorry, I'm old. Finding away on the typewriter. And she's
Look,
like,
I grew up with typewriters too, so.
yeah, okay, good. We're not old. And yeah, but like, she's like, you have this image, and she's like, but isn't that usually a man? And like, do you ever ask yourself like, who's making lunch? And I was just like, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. So she was just trying to paint a different picture. And it doesn't mean that your writing has to look like hers either, but I just like the idea that it can really look however. It doesn't have to any particular way. And the other thing you said made me laugh because I have a nephew who is about to turn 9. If I say he's 8, it's going to be a problem, right? So he's about to turn 9, and a couple of years ago, he asked my sister to video him, and he's, hello, my name is Nkosi, and I am an author. And he basically taken like he loves stories. He loves to be read. He's always been read to. He loves stories, and he sat down and he basically drew pictures and rewrote the story that he like. He just rewrote it in his own words. My sister stapled it together, and he was like, I'm an author. And it was funny because this is just after I self-published my book. And so I guess he'd seen my sister with my book going, oh, Auntie's an author. And he was like, I want to be an author too. So he just gets some paper and writes something down, stapled it together. And now he's like, I'm an author. And
I love it.
Listen, I was just like, may we all have the confidence of a 7-year-old child.
Yes. And I love that, and another thing that comes from that is, especially I think as Black women, like people are watching, like our families are watching. They're watching us do these really cool things and putting ourselves out into the world, putting our creative pursuits out into the world. And that can be, it's, for a lot of people, it's life affirming. It's it gives them joy. Look, my family, I don't think anybody in my family has actually read my book. I think they're afraid, and that's a thing. It's a common thing. Like with people who are authors, like the families won't read their books because they're afraid that if they don't like it, that they'll have to say something, or they don't want to have to say that, oh, I didn't really like your book. I didn't think it was that good, to to your sister or to your mom or to your daughter. And so like I've had to contend with that, but they are still so proud that their daughter, their sister, their niece has written a book and it's out there in the world, and like a lot of people are learning about our family that way. And and so like when your nephew's like, I want to write a book too.
Yeah, bring it.
You know what? We're changing the narrative. We are changing the narrative.
And I love that so much.
My auntie can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, and he's right. He absolutely can do it. And I hope he does. He doesn't have to, it's up to him. But I remember being that age and wanting to write a book. And I always tell people that's part of the reason I started this podcast, because when I was that age, because I grew up in Barbados. And
Bayesian.
I'm a Bayesian. That was not a Bayesian accent. I'm very sorry. Apologies to all the Bayesians out there. Anyway, so I grew up in Barbados. And I spent too long in the UK. Anyway, so when I was growing up, we would read a lot of books by Caribbean authors, books by African authors. Things Fall Apart. That was one of my.
Chinua Achebe.
Yeah, Chinua Achebe. That was one of my literature books. Things Fall Apart, and so, I didn't have the experience where I wasn't reading stories by Black writers, but I did have the experience where it used to just break my heart every single time, right? And I'm like, here's the thing, right? Like, I get it. It's important to talk about, like domestic abuse, whatever. I understand the importance of highlighting issues that are in the community, but I'm like, this is not my life. I really want this to be my life. And the only books that I could read that I thought, like, this is the life I would want, they were all by Enid Blyton. Okay, I'm not even ashamed. I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton books. The twins that sing. I tell people this is why I went to the UK to university, because I used to read about these girls in boarding schools in England, right? I know, right? And I was like, yeah, and I was like, it would have been awesome if I could feel like I could see myself in those books, but I couldn't. And I just thought to myself, like, apparently to be a writer in the Caribbean, you got to write depressing stuff. And I don't want to write depressing stuff. So
Right.
I kind of just ruled myself out as being a writer, right? Like, I'm like, I don't want to write about those things. I want to write about, rolling around under a donks tree, eating donks. Donks are a little that we have there, going to the beach and jumping off the jet with my dad, like the things that I was actually enjoying in my life. And I could see that there were books out there with children enjoying themselves, but none of them were ever about a girl from Barbados. All the girls from Barbados, I don't even want to tell you what those stories were about. Not right. And so I never even saw the possibility of being a writer because I did not want that to write that way. It was just, I love that even though I grew up with a typewriter, I also grew up in the era where I could self-publish. Like I self-published one of my books last week. I was like, ping, it's up on Amazon now. Look at that. I just love that.
So cool that we can do that,
Yeah. So I definitely think, anyhow, I can see that we are running short on time. So I really appreciate you coming to join me. And just before we go, I tend to ask people, what are you reading? And since you read a lot, maybe you can tell us about some of these things that you're reading, what type of things you like.
Yeah. So my sort of daytime driving reading is I use Audible a lot, so I read a lot of audiobooks, which is reading. For those of you who don't think that's reading, it is also reading. You're kind of a lot of pushback, still engaging with the book, just in a different way. And anyway, so I've been reading a lot of romance, and this is it's all like very heteronormative white people romance, but it's easy, it's fun. Emily Henry, I'm reading currently, actually right before this call, the beach read, I think was one of them. A lot of Abby Jimenez, who is, I think she's a Minnesotan Latinx author. So I've been reading her books, again, romance. But a lot of these romances they're typically, they're always happily ever after, because that's what a romance does, right?
Yeah, have a happily ever after.
Exactly. And if you want to call it a romance, it's got to be happily ever after, right?
That's right.
And there's those certain plot points that you just kind of expect, where the denouement is going to be, And so Abby Jimenez, Emily Henry, a lot of Taylor Jenkins, a lot of her things. Malibu Rising is one of them. The Seven Husbands of Eleanor Hugo is like, I've been reading a lot of that kind of stuff. And then my nighttime reading right now is by an author called Peter Heller, who is from the South, who's two of his books I've read. One is called The River, and the other one I can't even remember. But like, he is a very sort of literary suspense, literary thriller. Kind of reminds me of the sort of economy of a Steinbeck, but just more, definitely more modern, obviously, because he's still alive. Peter Heller. And he writes about the outdoors. And that's kind of where I live, and what my love is. And so I'm reading that, and it's like every night I'm like, for the like past couple of nights, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go to bed. So I can read this book. So that's what I'm reading now. Yeah,
I love that. Thank you for the recommendation, by the way. Lessons in Chemistry. You don't know this, but you recommended that book to me. It's
a good book.
Literally the best book I've read in a long.
Tell me really quickly what you think about the cover of the book. I think the American cover of the book does a huge disservice, because it looks like a book that is not very serious. But I mean, like, it definitely has humor. It's not a light read. But it looks like a beach read. And I think that, if you look at the covers, like the French cover or the German cover, they definitely tell you a little bit more about where the book is heading. Whereas like the American cover is like, oh, well, I'm gonna sit on the beach and read it. Fine, you might sit on the beach and read it, right? But it definitely doesn't qualify as a beach read, like that whole genre. And that was so disappointing to me. And it's also the reason why I didn't buy it on a bookshelf, because I was like, I don't want to spend money on this book, which is very elitist, even though I'm reading a bunch of romance and beach reads now. It's very elitist. And I was like, well, I don't want people to see me reading. This is ridiculous, you know? So, but somebody else recommended it to me, and I was like, okay, and this a person I trust, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to read it. And I was blown away and made even more angry by the US cover. But we've got to, it's all about sales, obviously, and like we want to sell to a particular demographic, and that's exactly what it does, right?
Yeah. That's it. I super enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anyone. I have been recommending it to people, and it's brilliant. And if you read ebooks and you want a romance novel, I'm going to send you that book I wrote during NaNoWriMo. And if you never read it, that's what I meant to tell you earlier when you were talking about getting feedback. Sometimes I say to my friends, like, I only want good feedback today, please. Like, I'm so honest.
I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair.
Good feedback only. So, obviously, nobody has to read your book. I'll send it to you. And if you're out, your plane gets delayed and you have nothing else to read, I'll just crack open this book.
Please do.
It's called Lessons in Love, because when I started my blog, I wrote about life lessons and writing about lessons, so it's called Lessons in Love, and it's about an agony aunt, because all my life I wanted to be an agony aunt. I was like, I want to be
what is an agony aunt?
Oh, maybe you don't call it that there. Like Dear Abigail.
Okay, yeah.
What would you call that? I'm really sorry.
Now I can't think of the word. Like, Dear Abby, dear John, one of those types of things.
Yeah. I don't know what you, but in my mind, I guess it's probably
some kind of like a column or something.
An advice column, that type of thing.
Advice column. There you go.
Yeah, and I've always been like, oh my gosh, I would do this with my life. And so since nobody's paying me to give them advice, I decided to write a book about it. This is what crazy. It was fun. It was super, 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 super fun. So I'll send it to you, and you absolutely pretend that you read it and say, "Oh my gosh, that's great!" Like how how your podcast does with it. I can't say that. My sisters are pretty good about my books. And they give really good feedback. But also I don't get offended if friends or family don't read my book, because that's fine. I'm okay with that.
You have to be okay.
You're okay. Absolutely. I totally agree. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been super fun. Yay. And yeah, I look forward to when your novel eventually hits the shelves.
Don't hold your breath.
I won't hold your breath.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on your.
No problem, Mirna. Thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new episodes when they drop. And if this has inspired you to get your own writing project into the world, click on my website below and learn how you can work with me as a writing coach or an editor. Until next time, I send you big love from a small island.